Ho, 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 and Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. Welcome to the G3 Metamorph League Week 1 and 2 Economics Special. I hope that you are having a very special Christmas Eve and that this holiday season drops for every single one of you a Mirror of Calandra. Speaking of Mirrors of Calandra, today we're going to take a look at currency evaluations as well as various fragment evaluations, Scarabs, divination cards, and a couple of uniques that we'll take a look at in today's snapshot of the Metamorph economy about 10 days or so into the league. One of the reasons why we like to do these sorts of discussions is so that way we can look back over time and, of course, see how different metas and different shifts, different demands in the market shape up. But we also do these as an informational piece for the entire community to be able to take a quick look at where it is that the economy is moving, how things are shaping up throughout the course of new content. And, of course, this league, Metamorph League, we've got both a new league where we get to run around killing bosses that we are building ourselves in our own Frankenstein-esque sort of way, but we've also got a whole bunch of new endgame because we've got a brand new Atlas system to work out. So it's quite interesting to see how both of these two factors are impacting the economy. So first off, of course, if you're new to the channel, you can like, subscribe, and ding the bell for more discussions just like this one. If you're a veteran of the channel, then you know the way how things work around here. All of these particular sites and references will be located down below in the video description, which also includes a Discord link if you want to jump onto our free Discord. It's free for everybody to join, and there's perks for Patreon supporters. And of course, above my slightly holiday festive balding forehead, there are timestamps for your viewing pleasure if you'd ever like to jump ahead or jump back and revisit any of the discussion points that we've had so far. So first off, mirrors are trading right around 100 exalts right now. That's right where they're trading as of the making of this particular video. It's been really interesting to see and compare where mirrors are at this league in compared to previous leagues. So when we're looking at and evaluating currency overall, it is depending on the new league mechanic that comes in, very, very dependent for how exactly a league is going to shape up economically. For those of you who are veterans, that's not a shock. For those of you who are new to Path of Exile, get used to it. Depending on the league, some leagues are going to be more currency-oriented leagues, and some leagues are going to be less currency-oriented in terms of their currency generation. As a general statement, when Legion is present, there's more currency in the league. Now, Legion has only been around for a couple of leagues, but when it's been present, there's lots of extra currency that's floating around. Right now, there isn't. I think one of the reasons why things are kind of moving up in some ways and kind of aren't moving up in others, things like Mirrors of Calandra, are simply because a lot of players are actually still actively playing in the solo self-found hardcore race league that has been going on that had a whole bunch of cash prizes in it. The fact that a bunch of the top-end, most dedicated competitive players in Path of Exile are not playing in softcore trade league, but rather are playing in hardcore solo self-found means they're having next to zero impact on the economy other than simply showing off their builds and then people copying their builds. Other than that, they're having zero actual economic impact on the economy other than simply influencing what builds are meta and what currencies are meta for pushing different objectives. So right now, since a whole bunch of people are over in hardcore solo self-found, we don't have a whole bunch of people who are the best crafters, the most dedicated crafters, crafting mirror tier items right now in Metamorph softcore league. So expect that to change. My prediction, and you all can quote me on this and come back to me and say, oh, Iron, on Christmas Eve, you said that Mirrors of Calandra were going to skyrocket in about 3 weeks. And I'm going on record to say that. That is what I am saying. Mirrors of Calandra are going to go back up to their normal rate of progress once a whole bunch of those players from hardcore solo self-found actually migrate over from that race league, from that seasonal race league that lasts 1 month. Once those guys are done, I think there's going to be a massive shift in the way how everything is working in the economy right now. For example, as a general rule of thumb, you can generally look at divine orbs and orbs of annulment, and they'll generally move pretty much one-to-one with one another, pretty close to one-to-one in terms of their value, because generally speaking, Players are going to want to use Orbs of Annulments when they're actually crafting top-end rare gear. And of course, for this league, we've got a whole bunch of new crafting currency that we're all going to want to play with, namely the Hunter's Exalted Orb, the Awakener's Orb, the Crusader's Exalted Orb, the Redeemer's Exalted Orb, and the Warlord's Exalted Orb. So we've got all of this new currency that we want to use in the league. That's to mention nothing of Catalyst. That's just talking about Exalt Slamming. Well, one of the things that people like to do as they are creating and crafting end-game gear is use Orbs of Annulments for when they mess up and when they hit something that they don't want to hit. However, this league, since not everybody has figured out yet exactly how to use the various new Exalted Orbs for crafting, it means that more and more players are relying on using unique armors and unique weapons for their desired slots on their characters. This means that Divine Orbs are actually higher valued than Orbs of Annulment at this point in the league because more and more players want to use Divines on Uniques rather than using Orbs of Annulment on Rares and then finishing near Mirror Tier Gear or Mirror Tier Gear itself with their Divine Orbs. So does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense to you. Feel free to leave me a comment down below if you'd like some clarification on it. But the general rule of thumb is it's if the league is a more craft-heavy league, Orbs of Annulments go up a little bit faster than Divine Orbs. If it's not a crafting league experience or not as heavy as a crafting league experience, which right now is what we're seeing, then that means Divine Orbs go up a little bit faster. Also, big shout out to Cute Dog, who came out with a video a couple of days ago about Ancient Orbs. I think he was the first one to do it, so that's why I'm giving him the credit for it. So, of course, Nemesis is back on map mods this league, which means that Ancient Orbs and Chancing Headhunters is a thing right now. And before Cute Dog made his video, Ancient Orbs, I think, were sitting at like 16 or 17C a pop. And then pretty much within 24 hours of Cute Dog announcing his video, somebody went out and made a whole big bump. And you can see it actually in the trade. You can see when his video came out that there was a continued growth in the Ancient Orb market where it moved from basically 16 to 18C all the way up to where it's at presently at the recording of this particular discussion, up to 24C on average. That is a wonderful piece of market manipulation, and if anybody had bought into Ancient Orbs prior to that video, then they're sitting on a good fat stack of currency at this point in time. Exalts right now are trading from 116 to 114, and then other than that, that's the last big thing that we need to look at for currency. Moving on to Fragments, we will take a look and see what I said earlier is true about Nemesis impacting Headhunters, which we'll get to Headhunter prices here in just a moment. But it's also true for Legion being available. And of course, Legion is core, and you can interact with Legion either by getting random Legion events that will spring up, or you'll also get Legion events that can come up via Scarabs, where you're forcing Legion to come up into your map. So we see right here for the top end of Fragments that the Timeless Mariketh emblem is at the top end of the value right now. Please note, this is going to be a league that people are going to figure out that Slayers are actually a very, very good ascendancy to have improved cull. This is a boss-killing league for Metamorph, and then, of course, we've got whole new bosses to encounter on the Atlas. So I would not be surprised in the upcoming weeks and days if more players figure that out and there's a whole big meta shift towards Slayer, kind of similarly to what we had actually during Legion. Maybe it won't be Cyclone Slayer, maybe it'll be some other form of Slayer, but I think people are going to figure it out and want to have a Slayer available for particularly difficult Metamorph bosses or uniquely difficult boss encounters such as Cirrus on the new Atlas. So once players start doing that, of course, they're going to also transition just from killing regular map bosses to also killing Timeless Domain bosses and farming Timeless Jewels, which, of course, next to Watcher's Eye, is one of the better and more important niche items that various builds require, which means not only do players need lab enchants, which means there's lab farming to do, they also need, of course, their various Watcher's Eye, which means there's Uber Elder to farm, and then, of course, people are also looking for their Timeless Jewel, which means farming the Timeless Domain. So we're going to continue, I think, to see these splinters go up for emblems, I think probably for the next week or two, simply because they just haven't capped out yet in terms of their value in relationship to selling slots for XP inside those Timeless Domain fights, which is still something that some players do, as well as selling off the profits of those 5-way Timeless fights, which are still incredibly high. If you're looking for something to do with your Betrayal Masters, I would highly recommend going for It That Fled as your leader of the research station. If you get that, you can simply go out and purchase a Chayula's Breachstone for roughly 173 chaos right now. Use that in your It That Fled research station and upgrade that from 173 chaos purchase all the way up over 100 chaos profit margin to a Chayula's pure breachstone. So that's something to consider for those of you who are looking how to actually generate currency using the betrayal mechanic. Jun having daily missions that you can farm is an excellent way to go out of your way to make extra currency with simple trades that are available to nearly everyone, because these are still going to be very, very popular breachstones. Up until about mid-league is where they generally typically level off in terms of their profitability. So keep looking for those Chayula's pure breachstones as a way to make profit moving forward. Other than that, some other fragments that are, of course, still relatively popular are, of course, Shaper fragments, and then the new, of course, Fragments of Shape, Fragments of Knowledge, and then as you scroll down, you'll see the other various types of fragments that are coming out and that are available to players. But for the most part, those early game fragments for Elder and for Shaper, those are trending downwards at this point because the players who were trying to rush them in order to make profit and then sell them have already done that at this point into the league. That doesn't mean that it's not something that you should personally run. Rather, I would argue it is something that you should personally run rather than trying to flip it or sell it, because if you sell it right now, its sell value is simply not that high. So I would actually prefer to run those rather than selling them, because their value is most likely not going to go up at this point. This is probably the bottomed out of where it's going to be for the league. So I would rather just run that style of content. That would be my recommendation for those of you who are taking a look at the contents of fragments that you might have collected for either Shaper or Elder. And who knows, you might get lucky. You never know if you'll get lucky and those fragments will actually produce something that's very high value to you, and you might be able to turn around and sell that. Looking at Scarabs, and speaking of popular content that players want to interact with, we of course at the top of the list have got Gilded Sulfite Scarabs, but they're coming in at the second spot this week, because right now Gilded Bestiary Scarabs, or Bestiary Scarabs, are actually at the top spot right now. Now, they've started to level off and started to come down a bit, but early on, getting those early beasts that almost everybody wants, whether that's creating an imprint of a particular item for crafting purposes, or of course if that's farming one of the various unique armor sets that drop from bestiary bosses, those are all incredibly profitable early on in a league, and there have been a whole bunch of people that have been buying up those Scarabs and running them for big time profit. Coming in at the second spot, that I imagine will take over the top spot in the upcoming weeks, is the Gilded Sulfite Scarab. This is a great investment, I think, because over the long term, players want sulfite. Players who play for the deepest delve in every single league are some of the longest playing players in leagues, because they want to hit the deepest depths that they can in a league, which means they're constantly going to be improving their character throughout the course of the league. And of course, delve is an infinite dungeon, and so you can continually work your way towards the bottom of delve in order to get yourself up to the top sides of the ladder. So players are constantly looking for more and more sulfite as they go deeper and deeper into delve. So these have got a big chance to swing up over the next several weeks, and I think Gilded Sulfite Scarabs most likely over the next 2 weeks, if you buy them now in between 15 to 17 chaos a pop, I think these have got the most chance to actually double in price, if not triple in price, by the time all of those players come back from playing hardcore solo self-found and they want to get back into the delve game. Not to mention all of the players who are already in Metamorph League who would like to actually be pushing deep delve depths in softcore Metamorph League, because maybe there's a whole new crop of competitive players that want to reach down into the top tier realms of depth, as it were, in Delve League, and they don't have as much competition because a lot of the other guys are over in hardcore solo self-found. So I would expect those Scarabs to go up. Coming in at the third spot is the Gilded Legion Scarab. Did I mention that Legions are really profitable? And that was why I picked Essence Drain as my very first character for this league. Oh, that's right. I did mention that, and I tried to give all of you a heads up. So those of you who paid attention to that, Congratulations, you're probably swimming in currency at this point in time, but legions are still really, really good and really, really profitable, even if you're not doing the timeless domains yourselves. If you're just selling off all of the various splinters and fragments and components to other people who are going to run them, they are still incredibly profitable to run, even right now at 14C on average. Coming in at the 4th spot is the Gilded Divination Scarab. This is another scarab that I think is interesting, but for risky reasons, for very risky reasons. As more and more players figure out the Atlas and more Atlas guides come out, which, by the way, tomorrow on Christmas Day, we'll have a discussion featuring the Atlas. But as more and more players figure out how to target farm divination cards, it means that more and more players are going to transition their builds from whatever build it is that they're playing right now into Magic Find divination card farming builds. So as players transition from whatever it is that they're playing now into Magic Find and really hone in on targeting particular maps in order to farm particular cards, that's where we will see Gilded Divination cards go up. So what's the ETA on that? Well, the ETA on that is exactly the precise point in time when there's enough players that have figured out the Atlas to actually spam individual maps or multiple maps that have got divination cards that they would like to farm, and the point in time when people become bored with the league. That is going to be the peak time to be selling Gilded Divination cards. That's when they're going to be at their peak. Because once players start to get bored, less and less players are going to be interested in farming divination cards. Less and less players are going to be interested in buying those divination cards and those items that made those divination cards worth farming. And, of course, as more and more players turn into divination card farmers, more and more of them are going to want to be buying those Gilded Divination Scarabs. And so as more and more of those Magic Find players drop off of the league, then they'll start to go down in terms of their overall net worth per scarab it is that you trade. So that's kind of a risky projection. It could be that we're at the point where maybe already this league we're not going to figure that out, or maybe because of Metamorph and maybe because of new boss HP, maybe nobody's going to play Magic Find characters anymore. Maybe Wind Ripper really is a dead item. But we will see in the upcoming days and weeks whether or not Gilded Divination cards will benefit from this new Atlas and from new Atlas strategies that emerge, or if it's going to suffer because of that. Speaking of divination cards, if you've dropped one of these from a stacked deck, then you are probably a very, very happy camper, and Christmas came early for you. Of course, House of Mirrors right now is on the rise because Mirrors of Calandra are in general on the rise, but the Doctor is still also on the rise, coming in at 9 exalts, the Demon coming in at 7 exalts as a stack of 10, the Fiend coming in as a stack of 11 at 5.8, and then we finally get to something that isn't Mirror of Calandra or Headhunter, which is Beauty Through Death, which is, of course, at Ziri's wonderful, beautiful shield that is just a wonderful build enabling shield. We may feature one of those in our weekly build series at some point in time. Then Alluring Bounty is coming in at a stack size of 7. That provides you, of course, 10 Exalted Orbs. Those were great to flip over the weekend. I'm not sure if anybody else was flipping those over the weekend other than myself, but there was a big time disparity between the evaluation of Chaos, the evaluation of Exalted, and the evaluation of Alluring Bounty. So that was great for us in the guild. Hopefully it was great for some of you as well. Nook's Crown is going to be an interesting one because a lot of players are still playing Summoners. As the league continues to go on, I think more and more players are going to migrate over to see that Summoners are still really, really strong. And it'll be interesting to see once that whole hardcore solo self-found race ends, how many of those guys come over to softcore and still continue to play Summoners. A lot of them are playing Summoners because of how safe they are and because of the DPS is consistent and it's also incredibly cheap to get geared up in SSF. So I wonder how many of those players are going to come over and want to have something like, let's say, an item level, I don't know, 100 Elder Bone Helmet. We'll see how many of those players come over and how that affects the Nook's Crown market. But right now, it's trading for about 1.4x per, and it's currently trending on its way down. Other than that, we've got a couple uniques that we wanted to highlight here. Eternity Shroud actually took a massive dip. I am so glad I didn't buy into that market with guild funds, that we avoided that. Eternity Shroud is out there, and it is available, and there are, of course, Eternity Shroud builds that are out there, but right now it's coming in as the top most expensive armor at 20 Exalted. Then there's Edziri's Reflection, which, of course, if you can figure out a way to either purchase off enough cards in order to purchase the prophecy, or simply purchase the prophecy yourself and then run it, you actually can make a good amount of profit by running the Edziri's Reflection prophecy and then selling Edziri's Reflection. I would put a little bit of a warning on that, just a stipulation of warning. There aren't many players that know about Edziri's Reflection builds, and so your market isn't going to be that big. So if you go out and you run this 5 times, it could be that there's only 6 or 7 players on the market at any given time that are selling these. So just be aware of that. It could be that you maybe take a break or end your play session holding on to a bunch of Edziri's reflections that are all evaluated at 19.6 exalted, and then the next time you come back on, everybody else has undercut you and everybody's actually selling at 17x. So just be aware of that with very, very high top-end items. Maloney's Mechanism is a great offhand leveling item that a whole bunch of people are using that are playing bow builds this league, because it's simply got a bunch of extra sockets, and so it's great to throw extra gems in, and of course turn those into level 20s, corrupt them, hope that they get level 21, and then you'll pay off your Maloney's in a couple of cycles of gems leveling to level 20. Well, speaking of leveling up and broken expensive things, the Headhunter right now is sitting at 73 exalted. We're not quite at the point where we were in Legion League, where Headhunter and Mirrors were moving together at the same price, and Headhunter was actually worth more than Mirrors for a time during Legion League. But nonetheless, Headhunter is on its way up still. This, to me, is an interesting sign. If you were paying attention earlier when we were talking about how Legion is still incredibly profitable and how many players are going to want to be farming the Timeless Domain conflict, that's still a thing. Headhunter farming is still going to be a thing. And oh, by the way, nobody knows quite yet how to farm the Atlas the most efficient way, or at least nobody's sharing that information yet. And so once players figure out what specific maps are the target farming maps for Tier 16, remember, we can raise the entire Atlas up to Tier 14 through 16 now. So pretty much every single layout and pretty much every single zone that could drop divination cards is now going to be a thing. Once people figure all of this information out, I expect Headhunters in price will actually continue to go up because of the amount of currency that drops off of the new bosses, as well as that are associated with Atlas of the Conquerors, as well as, of course, the bosses that are associated with Metamorph League, along with all of the other regular currency making methods, including, of course, we wouldn't want to leave out Legion. So Legion, when Legion is present and Nemesis is also present, Headhunter prices, you'd think Nemesis being available for chancing them would go down, but I think Legion's overall economic impact is actually showing us that it's pulling Headhunter prices up much, much higher than simply the ability to chance them is pulling them down. Well, that's our economy overview for the first 10-ish days or so of Path of Exile 3.9 Metamorph League. Go ahead and drop us a comment down below with your own thoughts on how the economy is shaping up this particular league. And of course, I hope that today and maybe tomorrow on Christmas Day is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.